And I am live. Well, hello friends. This was a spontaneous session that I didn't actually plan to do, but I sat down here at the desk and I just decided I might as well go ahead and live stream. So, well, it hasn't been a particularly busy animation day, although what I have done's been it's been a pretty productive day, let's put it that way. There's a bunch of shots that I've kind of punched up the characterization, or in this case, I did that on this shot, but I also, he didn't have his doggone armbands. So I added the armbands, put in some background on these two shots, the first of which probably still needs a little bit more touch up. But yeah, all in all, we're doing okay here. What did I just do? Here we go. Sped that shot up actually a little bit. It's probably running at like 10, probably 10 frames a second instead of 8. So anyway, where we're at is I'm looking at Tianara. I was actually thinking about completely redoing this shot, not because what we have is bad, you know, it's actually in the zone, but and I am going to try to fix up what I have here. But I think I could do a little more with the acting. So before I went live, I actually added this little change in her eyes. The thing about it is I'm wanting to see the emotion crawl up on her, right? Not just instant explosion, which is kind of what we have here. So earlier I did blur the background, and I would have to say, by the way, I mentioned I think it was yesterday when I live streamed, I was talking about Ed Hook's book, Acting for Animators, and as I mentioned then, I've had a few, I don't know, probably actually at this point I've probably had a dozen, back and forth emails with Ed talking about a variety of things related to mostly, I guess, really acting theory. I got the impression early on that when it comes to acting, that Ed was coming more from a method vantage point, which if you're not into acting, you might not know what that means. The way I think of it is, if you think about a traditional Shakespearean actor, the focus is on the final external expression. And the school of acting that maybe either prevailed or was at least prevalent in the late 1800s kind of came from that direction, and it would tend to foster acting that was very on the nose and somewhat exaggerated, you might say, because external gesticulations would be the way that you would convey meaning, whereas when you had the Stanislavski sort of school, and then that led to someone named Lee Strasberg in the first half of the 20th century, who formed the Actors Studio and developed, quote-unquote, the method, where you're really trying to get an actor to experience emotions consistent with the part that they're trying to play, so that and I'm speaking in very shorthand here, but basically the performance should flow organically out of the emotion. Well, anyway, when I first was talking to Ed Hooks, I really got the impression that he was going to be coming at the acting stuff from the vantage point of the method. And so, as I was trying to formulate questions for Ed, one of the things I was really thinking of is, well, how do you how do you translate that into something that's useful to animators when animators are essentially working microscopically? I mean, they're cobbling together a performance, one molecule at a time, sort of. I mean, if you use a cooking metaphor or something, it'd be like trying to bake a cake with molecules instead of with ingredients. Or in music, it's like trying to compose a whole symphony with nothing but step sequencing, which is not ridiculous. It's actually not ridiculous at all if you think about it. I mean, what did Beethoven do? He might have had a piano, of course, but basically it would all be written down on paper, so you had to develop that skill of being able to visualize in your mind what you were creating, even though you're creating it at this laboriously slow pace compared to, say, a live performance of some kind. So what I was thinking about is, well, how do you translate the method into acting for animators when you can't really, as an animator, you don't just get up with someone else and practice. You don't practice the acting. So it seems that to me that animation is a lot riskier in the sense that you're going to have a tremendous amount of time potentially into something before you ever know if you actually had a good performance. But what I found was, as I was pouring through the book, because I did finish the book yesterday, and it is good. It's going to be a permanent addition to my library, because once I got through about page 50, there were so many tips that were really useful. And what I found was, and it's kind of why I'm tackling this shot today, actually, is it really made me think. The problem the animators have is that you learn the conventions of animation. For me, it's why most CGI movies kind of all look alike today, because most of what you see in terms of the acting conventions that people have embraced is to take what worked well in, going back to even the earliest Pixar movies, and just reproduce that. So you're learning the lexicon of CGI characterization, if you will. You're learning the Pixar way of conveying emotion. And there's nothing wrong with that. You actually, you really should learn those conventions. And I always submit that copying great work is always a great way to learn anyway. But as I got through about page 50 of the book, I came to realize that not only were there a lot of great tips in the book, because it really got me thinking about acting and performance as opposed to thinking about animation. And it fairly quickly made me think about ways of doing a better job of telling stories in the animation medium, but it really coming at it from the vantage point of an actor, not an animator, which I think is a really, really good place to start. Especially because if you learn acting convention, then what will tend to okay, so actually let me back up a little bit. One of the things that I saw as a potential contradiction in what I was kind of seeing in this book, potentially, I'm trying to get Krita to stop acting stupid, was a seeming tug of war Let me think about how to say this. I'm going to keep working and think about how to say this. Oh, it looks like there's somebody here. I think I'm gonna retract the last statement that I was starting to say and then didn't finish. Suffice to say that getting away from animation technique and, squash and stretch and all the, anticipation, getting away from that and attacking animation from the vantage point of acting as opposed to animating as an end unto itself, I think for anyone would help them to get away from imitating animation conventions that you've seen and enjoyed in movies. You should learn those. It's okay to learn those. But what you're trying to do is find your own voice. So the contradiction I guess I was starting to allude to was the contradiction between learning the conventions of a craft on the one hand, but yet something that Ed had said to me in one of our earlier emails about being authentic or showing fealty to your own voice in your own creativity. Don't just copy the crowd kind of thing. Now, I think, I'm more of a pragmatist as a producer, so I don't put a lot of weight on the problem of copying, in the sense that I think all creative works are derivative works, actually. And so for me, it was like, well, what do you do? Do you learn the convention, or do you try to be authentic to your own voice? Because kind of from a marketing standpoint, it can be dangerous, to just be strictly true to your own voice and not give some credence to the market that you're producing to. And I think the answer for me is it's both. You want to know the conventions of your craft, and you also want to not be stupid. You want to think about what does the market I'm producing for kind of sort of want to see. Now, you can't predict it. I'm a big believer in the capitalist side of me happens to be especially because I'm more of a sales guy. Like, most of my customers come from me reaching out to people and selling to them, as opposed to coming, people finding me on social media or on my website or, that sort of thing. I swear, I don't know if I've ever had a customer just come to me in my life out of the blue. It's happened a few times, but it's always because of a referral from another customer kind of thing. So I don't consider myself actually great at marketing per se. I shouldn't say marketing. I should say promotion. Marketing is saying, let's design a product with some sort of best guess about the market that we're selling to, so that we create a product that market may embrace. Promotion is, well, I've got a product, now I need to let people know about it and find customers. Sales is the actual interactive process of, and it can be through an advertisement as opposed to an in-person experience, but sales is really presenting the benefits and asking for the sales. So marketing, promotion, and sales are three completely different things. So you want to be a good marketer. And that's what I mean by, don't be stupid. It's hard to sell refrigerator freezers to Eskimos, sort of the quintessential example of really bad marketing. But on the other hand, somebody will do it. But anyway, what I was going to say is, I'm a strong believer in the, you look at Steve Jobs with the iPhone, or even the iMac, if you want to go back even further in time. You see that the truth is that the marketplace doesn't actually know what it wants. And it's only once somebody takes the risk of creating something that then the market responds to it. So I happen to believe that demand is very much driven by supply. It's a little different if you're dealing with commodities. But in the general, space of creating products and then finding a market for them, I do believe that supply drives demand. Just because people don't really know what they want. If they find something that they really like, then they will tend to want more of it. So it is for sure true that, your second Harry Potter movie's more likely to be successful when the first one was successful, you know what I mean? Because people develop an appetite for it. But it started with supply. It started with somebody creating that first movie, or the books that, they came from, whatever. And so you do need to be authentic to your own voice. But anyway, so I got to look at, I don't want to get into too much blabbing here and not really think about what I'm trying to do animation-wise. Okay, the thing I wanted to do was before she explodes, I really wanted to give her a little bit more of a lead up to that. So, oops, that's not what I want to do. So I need to kind of learn my Krita, okay, hotkeys here in Krita 5. Okay, it looks like if you want to ripple edit, grab a keyframe and hit Shift Alt. Shift Alt is what allows you to ripple. That used to be just Alt, I believe. If you do Alt now, it looks like it makes a copy. And I don't... Is that a clone? I wonder if that's a clone. I'm not gonna assume. Control Shift X. Get rid of that. Because I don't necessarily know what the like the little, you know how it's not a solid color, it's got these lines through it. I'm not exactly sure what that always means. Like right there I clicked here and now this one's got the lines in it. What does that mean? I'm not sure. I guess it means that this is the keyframe you're looking at. This is the picture you're looking at right now, even though you're not on that frame. That kind of makes sense, I guess. So anyway, my goal tonight was to just it's pretty much a bona fide animation Truman Show episode in the sense that I'm just doing the work here. So what I want to do is, she kind of squeezes like this, and then she explodes, and I'm not sure that I'm sold on, she's pulling back. So again, what I'm thinking about is the acting. Hey Maria, I'm thinking about the acting. As I said, when I got through about page 50 of Ed Hook's book, I really came to the conclusion that that's a book I want to read multiple times and refer back to. It really is a good treatise on acting theory for animators. It actually is. And at the end of the book, he made the point, to my surprise actually, because I really thought he was coming more from the Lee Strasberg method angle. And I think his own acting, because he was an acting coach for 20 years before he got into, animation. Hey, Titus Penn. But he acknowledges towards the end of the book that everything about the method's not that useful for animators, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the pictures we draw. So I would say that one thing. So here's the problem you have. If you want to do better animation, for most people, just to get the mechanics of animation improved, you would probably do really well to video, shoot video of yourself either with a webcam or digital camera or whatever, and not to rotoscope it, but to capture the performance. The problem you have is pretty obvious, which is, well, what if you suck as an actor? Hey, Sifter. No, this shot's actually kind of old-ish, Sifter. It's, I don't know when I originally did it, but I don't know. I'm going to punch it up tonight. I'm 3/4 of the way through the 4th webisode in terms of getting the animation cleaned up and fixed up and suitable. And then I'll have to do obviously the soundtrack, voices, music, and then the, previously on Salt and Light. So I need to do that little segment, and then I need to do the outro, and then we'll have a 4th webisode. So yeah, I'm just going through the shots and kind of blabbing about the Ed Hook's book, because I did finish it yesterday. I read the whole. I was lucky enough to be able to actually find a copy at my library. And so, if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's the book. It's called Acting for Animators. So if I do a search on that, yeah, on Amazon. So this is the book I'm talking about. It's called Acting for Animators, and so I've had, as I said, I've had at least a dozen emails back and forth between myself and the author of that book, just talking about a lot of things actually, but it's mostly about acting theory and kind of like. But it was good to have the exchange to sort of discover what's the angle here, because I don't really want to waste this time when I interview him. So I want to really think of some thoughtful questions that get to the heart of topics related to. Well, I want to help him pitch his book, obviously, even though the book's been out for 20 years. He's working on the 5th edition right now, but as I mentioned the other day, it's pretty credible. I mean, Brad Bird wrote the foreword to the book, and when the director of The Incredibles says your book's pretty good, then probably your book's pretty good. And as I said, so there's a lot of really good stuff there that I think we could all learn from. And it made me think about wanting to inject a little bit more better acting into my cartoon. Now, obviously, there is a tug of war in that with an anime type of approach, which this isn't. Salt and Light is not strictly anime, but compactness of expression is really important to what I'm trying to do here. Partly for economic reasons. In other words, I want I want it to be an economical production. So we're not going for Disney here. So then the question becomes, well, how do you I don't know, compactly is a good word. How do you compactly, efficiently, not in the sense of workflow, but in the sense of the performance, how do you pack as much entertainment value into a shot without necessarily breaking the bank in terms of what it takes to do it? And there's certain idioms, obviously, in anime that contribute to that. Like right now with this shot, it would not be at all ridiculous to have the little squares pop up, the little anxiety effect. That could work. I mean, that could be a good way to do it. But what I'm feeling here is she's leaping into the reaction too abruptly for me. Okay, so now what do we want to do? Do we want to anticipate it? Well, the shot that's in there, this shot is a little questionable, but it goes by so quick it doesn't matter. So what would we do here, and maybe 2 frames ahead? Now I'll actually show you guys something interesting. The shot over here of Mel, when right at the beginning of the webisode I'm working on right now, we've got this shot where Mel is doing his laundry. Okay, it was interesting because after reading Ed's book, I pulled out Blender mainly because I was on the laptop, and I whipped together a sequence. I wanted to get away from worrying too much about drawing the character, and just feel both the emotion and the movement. And so this was actually done in probably 20 minutes. I mean, it really didn't take very long because obviously it's not a particularly detailed drawing, and it was just all about the movement and the organic, physicality of this, and the timing. And when I drew it, I was like, man, this would be a great shot, to finish it up. It's going to look real good. Now, to be fair though, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong screen. Okay, so I did this shot in Blender. As I say, about 20 minutes. Okay, so it's not really that much different than the shot that's already in the show, frankly. But go back to the show, you've got this shot. So after I did it, I'm kind of like, well, it's really not so much better that it's probably worth doing. We do need to get his freaking armbands in this shot, though, unfortunately. It's all over the map. Look, here he's got armbands. There he doesn't. There he doesn't. On the frame before the explode, when her brow was furrowed, if her eyes looked just left. Yeah, I mean, that's right. I love that word, Titus. Pensive. That's a great word. I agree with you. And that's a word I would use too, for sure. Yes. Yeah, that is a great suggestion. I essentially was doing the same thing with her whole body here when I had her just kind of going back and forth. But you're right. The eyes darting around would be quite useful in this little sequence. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and have some fun with exploring ways to say, well, we've got a 60 frame shot here, so that's, what is that? It's about 8 seconds at 8 frames per second. How can we squeeze as much out of this as we can? So yeah, the eyes darting right at the beginning definitely would be right there. I'm seeing that right here. It would be nice if her head actually moved with it, but I don't think that's necessary. So let's pop the little dart thing in. Now this is almost, to me, it's kind of following, well, it's sort of following CGI convention in a sense, in that she is a little cross-eyed. And that, I don't do that a lot in this show. Okay, this whole idea, this sort of Disney-esque thing that the people, as they're looking down, they look a little bit cross-eyed, but it has a certain charm to it, It's got a little bit of a Tinkerbell feeling to it. But in this case, that is what I did. So let's just say, if we... I don't think it's going to take much. Let's just play with this. And if I screw it up, I screw it up. It's no big deal. I don't think I quite got that. I'm going to zoom in a little closer. Yeah. I'm just hitting shift. Okay, and what I need to do is probably... So this is actually kind of hard to do. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but to actually get the eyes to do what I'm doing here and have them, it's a little risky actually, because now what I need to do, you'll see, what I need to do is basically cover some stuff up to make it work. Okay, really? And you can do the whole maneuver and then find out that the eyes actually aren't lined up exactly right. And this is where kind of a rigged approach where you got everything broken up into pieces a little better is, there's a trade-off. It sort of squelches your creativity to a degree when you're working with too many layers, but on the other hand, you really don't want to move the eyes to a new position in this way where you're doing a lot of repainting and then find out, well, yeah, but the problem is the eyes aren't lined up correctly. I only bring that up because I've had it happen a million times. It's a really easy problem to have, right? So this looks like it's probably okay. You can test it by just doing this. Grab a little... Okay, not bad. I mean, let's just get this... Okay, I'm too far out in the screen here. Okay. It's just... Actually, I think I did okay on the... No, it's all happening too fast. Her eyes would not dart that quickly. I just wanted to see if I lined them up okay. So we're maintaining that sort of cross-eyed look a little bit. Let's go with... What did I say the hotkey was? Was it Shift Alt? Yes. I'm going to just move everything downstream in this case. And then I assume we could have her look back the other direction, obviously. Sure, her eyes are moving to stage right. Do we bring them back to where they were, or do we bring them back even further to stage left? I don't know in this case if there's any great reason to kill myself trying to bring them back to further to stage left, so I think I can probably go. Yeah, I mean, and probably another one of these. Probably another one of those. So, yeah, okay, so let's go ahead and Turn off that preview range and let her, now let's let her have her explosion. Now, okay, so now this is pretty close. This is actually looking pretty good, I would have to say. She's thinking, and so I think I've successfully brought out the thinking just through action, so that's good. Not in a novel way, that's for sure, because I'm totally adhering to animation convention here. But it does work. I mean, it's pretty effective. Okay, and then she says, "What?" Right? That's the line of dialogue. Okay, and I'm kind of feeling that that you see how her lower eyelids come up like that. I'm kind of feeling like I'm wanting to probably see that through this sequence too. So that's gonna be a little more work for sure. But okay, yeah. And why not? If we're gonna do this, the most economical thing you can do to add life to a performance is to add eye blinks, frankly. So let's do that while I'm thinking about it, because right before she starts doing the eyes darting around, you would think there'd be a blink, and that rhymes. So yeah, we'll do that. Let's add a blink. I'm not worried about making this perfectly perfect. Let's see if it's looking good first. Ooh, that did not work. Wow, that really detracted from the... Okay. Okay, that did not work. I am going to reconfigure this. Okay. This is weird. It's kind of one of those weird little things. In that, when she can't... Okay, so like, when I moved her eyes, technically, it's not like the most perfect job ever. This is exactly the problem I was describing. The truth of the matter is, the inner eye, the eye that's stage left, you know, it's obviously her right eye, but stage left eye is too far over. It's exactly what I said I was kind of worried about doing. So, well, what are you going to do? I'm going to fix it. That's what I'm going to do. So yeah, this really needs to be a little bit further back like that. And arguably up a little higher. So I gave myself a little extra work to do here because I need to actually get some eye color down below. So this is sort of niggly detail, but if you want to get the darn thing right, well, sometimes you got to do the niggly details. So we'll get that on there, and then we'll have to obviously copy it over to any other instances of the yeah, it's still no good. Yeah, it's really one of those situations where you have to keep zooming in and out. You got to zoom in to, you know, just draw it. And I blew it again. That's probably better. Perfect. Oh, you're probably talking about the basic acting or the feel of it. Okay. So now let's fix this. Okay, we'll get that. We got the blink there. Yeah, it's going to be definitely a bit of a problem. In fact, I'm going to use my paste into layer one time here and Control Shift V. There we go. There we go. There we go. So that's supposed to be this. Okay, cool. I think I got it. Did I get it? I can't remember. I think I did. I think there's one I didn't replace. Shift spacebar to get back to frame 0. Okay, so now let's tighten up this. Since I like the blink. It's a good blink. Hey, Soda Pop. How do you like using Krita? What do you think its tools are up to the task with the new edition? Boy, Soda Pop, that's a loaded question. Let's put it this way. If your goal is stability or an unimpeded workflow, I really do still recommend most people just stick with Tahoma. It's really just less problematic and persnickety and buggy, like by a wide margin. I mean, there's like no contest. Krita 5 is kind of it's a mess, but it's not a mess because it crashes so much. It's more of a mess because well, particularly what I'm working on right now, working in the timeline, and basically everything that matters to animators. You know, the timeline, the working with keyframes, moving things around. It's a bit of a hot mess, you know. Ed Tadeo confirmed that in a live stream I did a couple weeks ago, where he said he had the same experience. Krita 5 is, you know, the new feature. The only thing that's interesting, really, to me in Krita 5 as far as features go, are the ability to do keyframe animation on a transform mask is really cool. Okay, because now you can do camera moves. Now you can animate a bird flitting around the screen. Okay, so that is cool, but realize that feature is also the most buggy, non-performant. In other words, what you can do with a transform mask in Krita 5, you've been able to do with much more reliability, much better performance, etc., in OpenTunes for several years. There's really nothing new there. The other thing in Krita 5 would be the ability to specify your resource location, which in my case is Krita 5/Dave. So I've got a subfolder within the Krita application folder called Dave, and that's where my resources are kept. So that's the stuff that is preference stuff. You know, it's your hotkeys. It's your, you know, when you pop this up, which brushes appear here, which collection of brushes appear in the pop-ups, things like that. The resource management is better in Krita 5, I would say. Everything else about it, mostly everything else about Krita 5, really for me isn't much of an improvement at all over Krita 4. Just the transform masks are it's, put it this way, if you have to use Krita, it's sure nice to have them. But if you don't have to use Krita, then you probably shouldn't be using Krita to animate. You know, I don't know. I tend to think if I was starting the whole thing over, you know, and I've compared it, you know, I'm always comparing, you know, Tahoma to Krita to Blender. And the only reason I've been in Krita this week mostly is because there's so many shots that I'm cleaning up and fixing up now that were originally done in Krita. You know, and there are things about working with the layers and, you know, the whole layer paradigm, especially for post-production and really punching up the imagery, Krita has some real strengths there. Basically because it's a paint program. It's a more capable paint program. But I don't consider Krita 5 to be some sort of coup for animators, that's for sure. It is a slight improvement. Okay, so what I was getting at earlier, let me just check this one more time because I'm talking too much and not thinking about what I'm doing. Okay, I really wanted to, number one, I want to get the eye blink back in there. Okay, so we've got that one more, and then we go into this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to move this back one frame, put an eye blink, I'm hitting control drag here, and then probably the smart course would be to just add that so I can then deform it. Okay, and Liquify's obviously Liquify. I use Liquify a lot. It's probably the biggest thing that keeps me in Krita probably is Liquify. You could make a strong case. Hey, Blift, I haven't seen you in a while. Okay, I'm looking at Sifter's comment. Yeah, I mean, it is nice. I mean, you got all this stuff. You can set this stuff here, and it's all kind of on the timeline. So I don't really put that much stock in those kinds of ergonomics, though, usually. Because normally what you find in software is, they put everything on one panel, let's say. Okay. But usually they're things that you could always get to before if you knew the hotkey or whatever, right? And speaking of hotkeys, that's one of Krita's greatest weaknesses. I mean, it's they made some bizarre choices with Krita 5 and made it even worse in the 5.0.1 and 0.2 updates. In that, what you've got is the developers making creative workflow choices for you and baking it into the software that may contradict what you want to do. For example, I've always been able to hit the W key or any other hotkey that I set in order to rewind in Krita 5. Heck, I think I was using Krita 5 for a month before I discovered that Shift spacebar was how you get it to actually go back to the beginning. And certain hotkeys are hard-coded into the software, and theoretically you can override them, but in practice it doesn't work. Even with Krita 5, you still got this conflict between the shortcuts that Krita expects and the ones that you set. Basically, it doesn't always respect your choices, which I find a bit maddening. And then they just change stuff sometimes, Control A to select all. I set my own hotkey. I'd rather set my own hotkeys. So I had Control Shift A would deselect all, right? Okay, some programs are like Blender where you can make a toggle, like you hit A and then you hit it again, and the first time it selects everything and the second time it selects nothing. Well, with Krita in 5.0.2, I think it is, all of a sudden they introduced a hotkey of Control D is deselect. So it's like, okay, I mean, I can kind of understand the logic of that, but you're introducing and oftentimes changing hotkeys that have become second nature. It's like it's part of your workflow, and now all of a sudden, stuff that's worked for a long time just doesn't work anymore. It can be a little bit, it can be quite frustrating, frankly. So, I don't know. Let's see here. Okay, if I'm going to do this is going to be risky behavior. It might not work, but I'll try it. Boom. Okay. You don't want to move your mouse very much if you're going to do this. Oh, see, I think right now we're seeing an example of one of the things about Krita that just baffles me. I've drawn this animation, and then just a moment ago, you guys probably didn't even notice it. It like blew by so fast. But I go to this frame, and it's not showing me the contents of this frame. It's actually showing me the contents of this frame. So it's like it's not updating. Little things like that are the kinds of things that make professionals that are trying to get real work done in real studios not even consider adopting a program like Krita. Because it's like, it's so light years away from what they're going to consider professional grade software, in the sense that they can just freaking rely on it, that I should think any studio would look at Krita mostly as a joke, actually. And I don't mean that to be mean, because obviously I use Krita a lot. I love the program, even though sometimes I complain about it. But it is not even anything close to a professional grade software program, just because there's just too many things that are not reliable at all, not even close to reliable. Okay, so I really want to extend this a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to hit, is it Control Alt? No, I think it was Shift Alt, sorry. Yeah, Shift Alt. I'm going to keep moving this downstream. And I'm going to try this one more time. Okay. Ah, Krita, did you just do what I think you just did? That was probably my fault. Okay. But I would almost swear I was on this frame, and then I made the move and then looked down and it was on this frame. But that was probably me. So probably can't blame Krita for that one. So if you're going to do a rotation with the Liquify tool, just be aware you want to move your mouse like 1 millimeter, if that. I mean, you really... And I mean, I've got this set as gentle as possible. I'll save my work and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. If you try to do a rotation with the Liquify tool, this is what will happen. I mean, you don't have to move your mouse very much at all. And by the way, it doesn't matter which way you move your mouse. If you move it up, down, back, forth, doesn't matter. Any movement at all causes the distortion. So it's not like you can. Okay, really, Krita? So it's not like you can rotate it in one direction and move the mouse back the other way and have it rotate back in the other direction. You can't do that. So it's a very persnickety tool, but it is kind of useful for little things like this. See that little shift in body weight? If you combine the rotation tool with standard Liquify, you can get a lot done. So, and like I said, it's probably the one reason I do stick with Krita, is I tend to use the Liquify tool a lot. So just little things like this. Little shift in her weight. And little stupid things like you just saw right there are one of the reasons I get angry at Krita. I changed the size to something like this. I did Liquify, went to the next frame, clicked to do it again, and Krita switched it back to the original size that it was. That's a great example of what I was talking about, that I would call a so comedically non-professional feature that it's insulting. Particularly because, actually, if you change the size of the tool over here with the slider, it does remember it. But, you know, that's what you get with Krita. I mean, it's a bit of a mixed bag, for sure. Oh, and the reason I tell beginners to stay away from it is because what they're going to do is they're going to be bumping into stuff all the time that's not really working the way they think it's supposed to work or whatever, and they're not going to know why. It's going to be... So you almost need a guru standing over your shoulder when you're trying to learn to animate with Krita, because so many things happen that are kind of stupid, and then you go, well, geez, maybe that's how the software is supposed to work. You know, maybe I'm the problem, and I'm just not used to it or whatever, right? And then you'll get things in Krita that like work one time one way and then don't, kind of thing. You know, I mean, it's really a bit crazy. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the rotation thing again, and now I'm going to reverse it. Okay, so I'm going to hit reverse here, click, in order to, and I could obviously just go grab one of these frames too. Okay. So Krita just did the same thing. This is another Kritaism. Actually, you guys are getting a lot of examples of what I'm talking about. You guys can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but I am really, really sure, really sure, a moment ago I clicked rotate. And then when I clicked reverse, Krita decided, oh, you clicked reverse, so you didn't mean to do rotate, you really wanted this, and it switched it. Okay. And like I said, you can rewind the video and check me because maybe I'm wrong, but I've seen, especially with the Liquify tool, I've seen Krita do that a million times. You're using one tool, and then you change one parameter of the tool. If you haven't actually clicked in the picture and invoked the tool, then when you go to change one of the parameters, it switches you back. So you wind up adopting really bizarre workflows. Like, for example, where you would select rotate, and then you'd click somewhere in the scene and like do it, and then hit undo, so that you can then hit reverse and have it not switch back to the other tool. I'm not making this up. This is the kind of stuff you bump into like all over the place in Krita. And it's why it makes me nervous to recommend it to beginners, because it's just not a mature program. As a painting program, it's kind of amazing. I mean, it's definitely up there. But as an animation program, it's, no, not even. I would never in a million years ask a studio to depend on it. No freaking way. No way. I can get away with it because I'm one guy, and I can know what all the bugs are and kind of work around them. But I would be embarrassed to foist Krita on a studio, and then 5 minutes into using it, they're starting to bump into things that they're going, what the hell is this? What is this doing here? And I'm like, oh yeah, I deal with that all the time. Well, why are you recommending this software to us if it's just, really? But to be fair, I don't know, maybe Clip Studio, I don't know, Clip Studio Paint may have its quirks, TV Paint may have its quirks. Blender certainly has its quirks too. So I'm not trying to be overly negative in the sense that all software has their quirks. So I wouldn't say Krita is bad for animation. I'd say it's bad for animation for beginners. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so Krita still has a tendency to forget certain operations. No box transform anymore. Well, when you're talking about transformations, Sifter, the standard free transform that's a box, in other words this, is quite reliable. I mean, that's a very reliable tool. And so if you're doing the transform mask and you're trying to animate it, then you can only do this anyway. Well, I should say, if you're going to use a transform mask and you want to animate the box, in other words, you want to move her around the frame or the scene with keyframe animations, then you have to be doing a free transform. You cannot use perspective, warp, cage, liquify. You can't use those because the pixel buffers will literally just disappear. Your animation will disappear. What you can do is you can apply a transform mask, and you can use Liquify if you don't give it an animation keyframe. And then what will happen is the Liquify distortion will be applied to all the frames in your animation. And sometimes that is useful, actually. Well, the OCA workflow thing, I mean, I'm still at a bit of a loss to appreciate where that's actually that useful. If you've got put it this way, if you're in a studio situation, you've got people that are trying to exchange data, they're using different kinds of software, and by gum, they expect to be using software that they can reasonably rely on not blowing up or doing something stupid every 5 minutes, right? These are the assumptions of a professional working environment. I relate it to, if you had a table saw, if you're a carpenter and you've got a table saw, okay, imagine a scenario where you have the tools with your saw that allow you to set the height of the blade, or they give you a built-in jib, an adjustable jib, so that you can make a perfect 90-degree cut, parallel to the edges of the board that you're cutting. Okay, now imagine if you were using that table saw, and seriously, I'm not exaggerating, whenever you set the height of the blade, sometimes it'll be the actual blade that it'll be the height you set, but sometimes it'll be a little off. Okay? Well, if I'm just cutting a piece of, I'm cutting a piece of wood to, I'm just making something up here, to replace the leg of an old bench. Okay? Something stupid that doesn't matter. Okay? Then I may not care about that 1/8 of an inch tolerance. But the thing about this table saw is that not only that, but also the jib, when you go to cut a perfectly straight line, just so you know, from the beginning of the cut to the end of the cut has about 1/4 of an inch variance. Okay? You can use that saw. Okay? You can get work done with that saw. It is true. I know, because I have a crappy table saw. But you would never in a trillion years even consider using that saw in a professional carpentry shop. Because it's essential that the things that you expect to work a certain way do. Now, every once in a while, do they fail and now the equipment has to be upgraded or replaced? Of course. Not saying that doesn't happen. But in the general case, you expect your tools to actually work reliably. So now, why do I make that point after all the other things I've said about Krita here? Well, because you're mentioning OCA. Well, OCA, this is what happens. People post something, we've got a plug-in that'll get us from Krita over to Blender. It's the most exciting thing in the world. It's amazing. And I tried it, and in my experience, I followed all the instructions, and both the exporter from Krita failed, and the import into Blender failed. Okay? So it sounds really great on paper, but nothing about it worked at all. And then somebody else comes in here sometimes and they'll say, well, it worked for me. And it makes me want to say, okay, show me the work you did. Show me the animation work you did that utilized it in the workflow. And, well, correct. Of course I wouldn't put it on a production line. The bottom line is that when you're dealing with open source software, you do not have a contract of trust. You don't. You have no promise that anything's going to work at all for anything. Oftentimes it does. And that's great. But there's no contract. There's no real implicit agreement that the software is not going to be buggy or goofy or whatever. There is no such implicit agreement. And I say this as a guy who uses open source software almost into my entire workflow, actually. And increasingly so, because, I have commercial tools on the business side of things, content management, things like that, that I'm actually looking at different ways to migrate over to tools that are free, not because they're free, but because they're actually better, because the tools I'm using in that, the commercial tools are really old, I haven't updated my content manager in years. Okay, well, I think we're doing okay here in terms of the animation, I must say. Okay, so she says, all right, I gotta hit shift spacebar. What? Okay, I want to anticipate that W though, like right here. Yeah, I definitely want to anticipate that here, so I'm gonna go. So I'm only talking about it because you asked, and plus I think was it Soda Pop brought up the OCA thing. I mean, if it works, when you say, by the way, Sifter, when you say yeah it worked, are you saying when you use the OCA thing? Is that what you're talking about? Worked? You tried the plugin and you were able to share some content between like Krita and Blender or something? Is that what you're talking about? Because if it works, or if I need to try it again, I mean, I don't know why I would. The benefit is saving the timeline timing for your imported TLV line work and also shadow fills. Yeah. I mean, it does sounds like a good benefit. I mean, I'm not. I'll just play. I'll just play the devil's advocate. Is that in practice, like for example, one thing you can do with Krita that does work pretty well, and I never use it, but I could, is and there's the OC export, but export layers. This actually works quite well. So again, I haven't used it in a while, but as I recall it works fine. So you can actually have an animation that will, it seems to me, I better not have you guys quote me on this one. I thought maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I'm pretty sure I was thinking that, and it might have been another plugin I looked at, but where, okay, in other words, put it this way. Okay, this is the pragmatist in me, so I'll explain it to you this way. If I had to get to Blender, and I've done it many times. What I would do is I would export this as an image sequence, and then I would map it to a plane in Blender. That's what I would do. It would take me roughly 1 minute or 2 to do that. So then what I find is that having images be the common thread across applications is extremely robust. It always works, and it's almost never a problem, with some small exceptions having to do with pre-multiply on your alpha channel, which can get you into some trouble with OpenTunes or Tahoma sometimes. But the images are a reliable medium of data exchange. And you can export, again, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember how to do it, but as I recall, we can export all the individual layers from a Krita animation as image sequences, and then you've got, obviously, the setup on the other side where you have to get them all set up. Whereas if you weigh that against the time and hassle it takes to get OCA working perfectly, well, I don't know. Your mileage might be different than mine. It might turn out to be a big win for one person and maybe not so much for somebody else. All right, I'm going to let this animation loop and take about a 1 or 2 or maybe 3 minute break. All right, I am back. So, um, hmm. All right. Where'd my stylus go? Okay, so Soda Pop and Sifter seem to be on the same page about OCA. There's a way in Blender, if you turn on the auto key, hit play, and then move an object around, Blender records everything so you do, which is a substitute to acting someone. Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, I mean, if you have auto keying turned on, and you just hit play, so it loops, and you grab anything and move it, it's going to set animation keyframes. I would defy anyone. Remember, guys, I'm not trying to be a know-it-all here. Okay, I really am not. I'm coming from the perspective of somebody who's doing this. I'm doing a lot of work here, and so yes, I use tools that have some questionable characteristics, bugs, whatever you want to say, but and I've just learned how to work around them. Okay, so oftentimes, as I said earlier, my advice is usually for beginners, in the sense that I don't think Krita is the best choice for a beginner, and I do think Tahoma is. I think it's a great. And Enoch Kawai, go ahead, ask your question. We're happy to answer it. So my point to your comment, Sifter, is I would almost defy you to show me a use case where what you described in your comment is actually useful, because it's so hit and miss. I mean, I'll show you guys what I'm pretty sure Sifter's talking about. Let's just use Blender 2.79. It doesn't matter which version of Blender you're using, but the bottom line is if you put a monkey in your scene, and we got to be in object mode, but basically, I think this is what Sifter's saying. If we now hit, I turned on auto keying, okay? So now I hit play, and if I hit the G key and I move the monkey around, it's going to set animation keys. Okay, so all I'm saying is I can't even imagine a scenario where that would ever be useful. Now, if you're not playing, if it's not playing and you're going to play around with it to sort of find your keys, like so, so auto keying is certainly useful. But anyway, getting back to OCA, I mean, the use case here would be, I assume, I don't know how this translates, I don't even know if it translates to grease pencil, but my assumption would be that the use case would be that you're wanting to export all the individual layers with their animation keys and the imagery that goes with them in some sort of organized way that Blender can then import and understand. So as far as I know, the only way that would make sense coming from Krita would be if what it's bringing into Blender is image sequences, right? Oh, showing up in OpenTunes as a TLV. Well, but Soda Pop, it could never be a TLV. Do you understand why that's true? You understand it could never be a TLV. It could be a raster level, but it could not be a TLV because, so maybe you just misspoke. But I don't want anybody that reads the comment to misunderstand. You're not gonna turn anything from Krita into a TLV. A TLV is a smart raster layer. So the key characteristic of a TLV or a smart raster layer is that you can procedurally change the colors after the fact. There's some other nuance to what makes a a TLV or a smart layer what it is, but basically you're not going to bring something in from Krita that's going to do that. What you are going to bring in from Krita is going to be a plain old, just a dumb image sequence, which you can, paint over, obviously, but so it would never be a TLV. And so SodaPop says that XDTS transfers to .tlv. Well, I don't even know what XDTS is. Okay, so now what we're hoping for, again, let's look at this from the perspective of, I've got a studio and I'm considering hiring you. Okay? And the reason I'm hiring you is for your technical acumen, SodaPop. You're the guy that's going to come into my studio and help me run my studio better. Okay, great. And so what you're telling me is, oh my God, we've got a way that we can have the seamless data exchange between Krita and other programs like, for example, Blender. But in this case, you're saying, well, you're using OpenTunes or Tahoma, so you need TLV files. Okay. So what do I get? I mean, maybe I could see where maybe it would come in as a TLV where the initial color is set to whatever the color was in Krita, but that would be a little bit strange if there was any sort of gradient or color variation within a single layer, unless it's going to go ahead and quantize it and come up with a palette that kind of sort of makes it work. So I'm like, I don't know if that's going to work. And now what you're telling me is, well, it's not that simple. What you have to do is you have to go from, you got to go from Krita to OCA to XDTS to TLV. So all I'm saying is, probably in theory it works. Probably in practice it works okay. I would be amazed if it worked as advertised. And then the question becomes, well, and again, not trying to pour water on your idea, because it's a cool idea if it works, right? But I now have to take two different conversion steps and hope that they're all coded really well and that I'm actually going to be able to get work done in a useful way. All I'm saying is I'm skeptical that's really all that useful. And I would argue that I bet you I could show you that in the very rare use case where it actually matters and you'd really want to do it, it probably would have turned out to have been a heck of a lot faster and easier to just export the image sequences and bring them in, even if you had to reconfigure the timing. When I take like this image sequence, like every single, these are all individual keyframes that are all different. Some of them are copies of other ones, but basically there's a lot of keyframes there. To take this, okay, and copy it, just go Control-C, Control-V, and use the clipboard to bring it into Tahoma, and then to have to completely recreate all the timing in Tahoma would actually only take about 2 minutes. With this many keys, the copying and pasting would take a little longer than that. But basically, reproducing the timing, I've done it many times here. Reproducing the timing doesn't really take that long, a couple minutes. You just look at Krita, you jump back here, extend the image out, then you come back to Krita. You just go back and forth, and it's a bit of a pain, but you can do it. So you're saying OCA is going to be a local format soon in OpenTunes with way more features. Now that would be cool. That would be cool. Yeah. And I know that Clip Studio, I mean, those guys, obviously they've got a they've got a commercial incentive to provide the features that their users want, because it's a commercial product. So and I know that Clip Studio has made some strides towards exporting timelines and whatnot that can be brought into, I think, OpenTunes. I'm not super familiar because I'm not a Clip Studio guy, but I have it, but I don't really use it. So, okay, let's get back to work here. And yeah, I'm actually missing the The eye blinks here. Yeah, I actually think here, I actually want an eye blink here too. What the heck? And this might backfire, but I'm going to try it. Make sure you're in the right layer there, Dave. And I just hit the G key, and oh, I thought Krita missed it. So kudos to Krita, it didn't miss it this time. I thought it did. So now I got to grab the shadow color. You know, at the end of the day, it's just a, you know, to me it's like, what does the work look like, and are you getting it done? Because if you are, then it really, whatever tool does it for you, that's the tool you should be using. You know, with animation, you're going to be at it for a long time, so you probably want to use a tool that you enjoy using. And I would actually argue that enjoyment in using the tool, even if it's a less capable tool, if you like using it, you're probably better off to use it, because even if you have to do things the hard way, if you're having fun, that's probably more important, because you're going to be sitting there working with that tool for a long time to get any, you know, any real work done. So just is what it is. I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question, but Enoch, this has been asked here before. Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Yeah, and sorry, Enoch, for ignoring your question. You know, for audio, obviously a lot of people like to use Audacity because it's a free program. It's pretty good. I use Reaper. But yeah, as Maria said, there's lots of DAW software out there, and and a lot of your video programs are going to give you reasonable audio support, you know, for multiple tracks and things like that. I mean, you can really do a lot with Blender, but Blender, as has been brought up a trillion times, is a fairly big learning curve. But the video editor, which does let you bring in multiple, you know, audio tracks as well, in Blender is quite a capable video editor. You know, there's pretty good color correction tools, and you know, as I say, what you can't do with you know, again, we're talking about a professional working environment here, which is probably not what Enoch needs, but you know, where audio falls apart in a program like Blender is, what do you do when you brought a sound effect in and now you have to EQ it? Boom, game over, you're done. Can't do it. I don't know about Shotcut or, you know, some of these freebie video editors that are really pretty good. You know, they're really pretty good for quick and dirty video editing for sure. But for the stuff I do, you know, when I'm working on audio, I do recommend Reaper. Reaper is going to be like Blender, you know, in the sense that it's a big learning curve. But you know, and I'm kind of talking to Enoch here, but when you're talking about doing the soundtrack for a cartoon, I mean, look at what we have here. You know, we've got quite a few tracks of audio. This is all voices up here. This is an automation curve for all the music. This is all the music tracks. And in here, these tracks here are the sound effects. So there you got a little sound effect there.
Majesty. Perhaps Asher does.
But not Blender, but Reaper is functionally free, because you can download it right now and use it for free as long as you want. It just has a nag screen if you don't pay the $60 to register it. And there is, I've scored 8 feature films with this software. This exact version of it too, which is like practically probably a 10-year-old version. You know, so Reaper is very well maintained, very stable. There is nothing in the domain of audio and music production that you could ever want to do that you cannot do in Reaper. It's very, very feature complete. It's very, very powerful. you know, virtual instruments. You know, we've got, but as I said, if you bump into a situation where, you know, you say, well, the voices aren't quite right, so we have to EQ them. You know, so these tracks have EQ on them. They've got compression. They've got, you know, what you might call an exciter. You can't do any of that in Blender. You can't do that in Shotcut, or, you know, if you really want to be able to work with sound effects, and in fact, these sound effects here, for example, here you got this effect I think I played. Okay, well, if we turn off the effects so that we don't have any reverb, this is the actual sound effect. That's the actual sound effect. But then once you add the EQ and the reverb, you get this monstrous, you know, like a trailer sound effect. And frankly, that's what I've often used it for, because I've cut quite a few movie trailers in my time. I've not only created trailers for all my movies, but actually my film distributor, a couple of years ago, they had me cutting trailers for a lot of, well, let's say quite a few classic films that they distribute. So, you know, Reaper's my tool. I think we're doing okay here, guys. I think I'm going to render this and cut it into the show and see how it's looking. Wait a minute. Okay, so she goes... Okay, we probably do need a little bit of a transition here. We're up to 60... Okay, the original 60 frames, and we're definitely lengthening this thing. I do not like that. That is too abrupt. So I'm going to actually push that out. And I feel like we need the... so we've got an eye blink there, but I'm kind of feeling like we need one here too. Boom, right about there. So I'm going to smack an eye blink in right there. Gee. So does that help? Enoch, I don't even know if Enoch's still here, but it's always tricky when somebody asks a question like that. Say, what's the best software for sound effects? Well, I'm not really sure that he means for editing audio, or if he means, you know, people ask questions like that, and what they really meant was, you know, where do I find cool sound effects, you know? Because oftentimes things like that sort of come with an app attached or something of that nature. So, I don't know. Hey, Mar, I see you're here. Welcome to the party, buddy. I'm just kind of doing the grunt work tonight. Max is here. Hey, Max. How fast they're improving Blender. Yeah, 3.1 is out. They could add an equalizer. There's no reason why they couldn't. You know, they could certainly make Blender, being especially that its roots are as a Linux program, you know, to make it compliant with like LADSPA audio plugins and things like that, of which there's a enormous library of free ones that are very good for things like EQ and reverb and all the rest. There's certainly room for Blender to become a viable audio production tool. No question about it. Whether they'll get there or not, we'll see. What I'm wondering now is, what is this frame? That's just her turning, so that's not that important. Okay, so let's save our work and let's get this rendered into the show and see what we've got. Any thought on Audacity? Well, Audacity... Put it this way, this came up a couple of weeks ago. Most people that are using Audacity are not using it for multi-track recording, but you can. You know, I haven't, because I've never had a reason to, because I've been using Reaper for about probably 12 years. But if you're starting out with audio, in terms of being stable and having lots of plugins for audio post-processing, Audacity is very, very good. Now, it's not real time. Okay, so if you know what I mean by real time, meaning non-destructive. When I add an audio plugin for, let's say, EQ in Reaper, it's being added non-destructively. And Amar's advice for most people is the correct advice. You can use Audacity for basic sound editing and then a DAW for sound engineering. If you're going to do, sometimes, once in a while, like in Reaper, for example, you can have Reaper pipe an audio file out to Audacity so that you can do destructive editing, save the file, and then it wakes back up in Reaper with the changes baked in. I haven't had to do that in years because I would have to have so many effects added before it would start tapping out my CPU or something that it's... And that's true even with a fairly underpowered laptop, actually. It takes a lot of audio these days to make a computer start puking. So... Max Power's been using Blender for a really long time. Okay. Well, I mean, you guys know before I was working on Salt and Light, all the video editing in the anime I was working on before that was I was editing the thing in Blender. So, but I don't think it would have sustained the effort. I mean, I still would have had to do the audio in Reaper and then you know, bake out the processed, you know, multi-track audio and then bring those tracks into Reaper the way I did here. I mean, that's what I've done here, actually. So in even here in Vegas, we have non-destructive editing. I could add all kinds of plugins here as well. You know, you can add a plugin chain in Vegas, but I usually don't do... I pretty much do most of the audio in Reaper, and then what we have here is, this is a stem. This is what's called a stem. And so that's going to be...
Oh, hey, Melchizedek.
Just
Who's
the
your
voice.
friend? I don't know.
So that's going to be just voices. This stem is going to be just sound effects. And then this stem is going to be just music. This one down here. And that... And that's, you know, it has to be that way because that's... My distributor needs that. The distributor, especially if they're doing... If a distributor's doing, well, if they're selling internationally, they have to have the ability to take the dialogue out and potentially replace it with translated voices, right? So they have to have the ability to break the voices, sound effects, and music apart if they need to, and so. Well, don't worry about the labels, Sifter. Think of it this way. If you can take an audio file and do something to it that makes it sound the way you want it to sound, then you're essentially editing audio, or if you're cutting it into pieces or making the clip shorter or whatever, you're editing. Okay, engineering, when people use that term, they're basically talking about sound design. They're talking about what you hear in the whole, like when I bring the project up in Reaper, that would probably be called sound design or engineering, because it's more of this creative process of building up this multi-track environment in order to create a soundscape of voices and music and sound effects that all create the, you know, a show, right? So that's usually the actual technical process of making creative decisions. Like here, if I, for example, was doing this would be definitely called audio engineering. If I'm listening to the show, and now I'm moving the faders and I'm baking some automation into the faders so that I'm adjusting the music around the voices and things like that. This is what people refer to as audio engineering. It's what the guy sitting at the mixer does. The guy that is bringing wave files in and assembling this into something is usually called a sound designer. And then obviously the guy that's creating the music is called a composer. So I'm the composer, the sound designer, and the engineer, right? I'm all of those people. That's it. And it takes a long time to get pretty good at all of them, you know. It's kind of asking a lot. So, Anyway, back to the show here. I cut in the... Okay, so there's the shot we just cut in. So let's just kind of see how things are flowing here. What? Y'all see, look at this. We didn't even have the turn. Oh, I see. I used it here. Okay, okay. Well, actually, that's a different shot. So that's fine. I'm glad I didn't include it here because, you know, I was wasting time because after it gets past here, it cut away from the mother. Because when I edited the thing, I'm sure I felt like, oh gosh, this is like going on too long. Yeah, cuts back to the mother. Then we have the turns, and that's from a different shot. And then this is all highly exaggerated. She's like, no. Oh, Tianara. Really? It's like, what are you complaining about? You get to marry a prince. What are you, nuts? Well, I have to say, actually, guys, I'm wondering if... I'm probably going to punch up that shot a little bit, but actually my work here might be getting close to being done. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked, but because I only released webisode 3 like 5 days ago, but I gotta say, I mean, webisode 4 is looking pretty tight. I think I need to get busy on the soundtrack. Yeah, by the way, DaVinci, you know, if you can get it installed and working, DaVinci is a massively powerful program. Soda Pop, are you using it? Are you using Resolve? DaVinci Resolve, same thing. The program's really called DaVinci Resolve. But yeah, Soda Pop, are you using it in your day-to-day work? You thought about getting Cakewalk since once? I hadn't heard that. See, I used Cakewalk for several years before I adopted Reaper. I went from Soda Pop to Traction to Reaper. So I'm an old timer with Cakewalk. So what did they do? Did they is it abandonware now or something? Did they release Sonar or did they switch the name back to Cakewalk? What's going on with Cakewalk, guys? Let me know. I'm interested in that. Yeah, Resolve with Fairlight is like I said, if you can get it working, it's quite an amazing combination because you're getting all the benefits of Vegas with all the benefits of Reaper. Now, I don't know if DaVinci has MIDI sequencing. I'm guessing it doesn't, and that's so for composers, that's kind of where it sort of broke down. But when you say Cakewalk, though, because remember, gosh, around when was it? Must have been around 2005 or something. Cakewalk 9, when they upgraded to the next version, they changed the name to Sonar. So have they switched it back to Cakewalk? I gotta look this up. The best software for recording and... So it looks like they've changed the name to Cakewalk by BandLab. Interesting. Interesting. Announced the relaunch of Sonar as Cakewalk by BandLab. Interesting. That's worth looking into, folks. I mean, Cakewalk is a venerable program. It's been around for years, and I did oodles of radio jingles, tons of radio jingles, music for movies, although once I actually was doing the underscore, I don't believe I ever did a score in Sonar or Cakewalk. But that is definitely an interesting development. I wonder why they're doing the freebie thing. They probably have like a, you know, there's probably a paid upgrade of some kind or something going on there, I would think, but who knows. So sorry guys, I was on the wrong screen. I showed this. This is what they're talking about. Cakewalk by BandLab. Kind of interesting. Check it out if it floats your boat. So, I'm just doing a due diligence pass here through the episode, looking for things that might be objectionable, but honestly I think I'm probably going to be starting work on the soundtrack tomorrow for this one. Can't believe how many shots I've punched up in the last few days. Yeah, and this is definitely going to be an interesting score. This is going to be a more animated score. No pun intended. That I need to look at on the big screen. Boom, 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 boom. Let's jump over here. See, that exaggeration there in the cartoon, I don't mind that. I think it fits the tone of what we're trying to do there. I guess that looks okay. So I was a little concerned, but I guess I needn't have been. Just the low resolution display was making it look like it was a little rougher than it was. So Amar asserts indeed that it's an online DAW. Are you saying it's actually a cloud program now? Yeah, well, Audition is actually just Cool Edit. I mean, when Adobe bought it, they just changed the name to Audition. And they improved it a bit. I mean, Cool Edit was not a non-destructive program before Adobe got a hold of it. Even in its first multi-track incarnation, I do not believe Cool Edit Pro was non-destructive as far as effects processing. It couldn't do like VST effects and things like that. Okay, so it's a cloud app now, huh? Interesting. Could be. Yeah, you access it via your account. Okay, right there. See, there we've got a certain attitude about this sequence. So he's a little off character there, but here, well, gosh, this whole sequence is one of those that's, you know, it's cartoony, right? But again, there's kind of some comedy here. This is a fairly funny sequence here where Mel's trying to hide the fact that he just took Asher's best garment and got ink all over it and then stuffed it in a tree, and then, you know, Asher comes along and, you know, how's the laundry going kind of thing, right? So the sort of silly cartooniness of this sequence through here, I think it kind of works. You know, I don't know if I want to try to change those shots stylistically for no good reason. Things are bopping along here. I think what I'll probably wind up doing is getting the score and sound effects into this sequence, or, you know, webisode, if you will, and see if the bouncy character of the music sort of sews it all up. And if it doesn't, then we may come back and consider doing some revisions on the visuals. But honestly, I think we're probably in pretty good shape here. This sequence, I mean, most of these shots have had something done to them. You know, here I punched up her eyes because she really just didn't have enough, like, eye makeup kind of thing. Yeah, cloud-based DAW would be interesting to try. Could be they're using some cross-platform framework like Electron so that they can actually, of course, if they were using Electron, they'd be... it's possible. It's possible. Because if you're using, if you're using web audio in the browser, nobody's really come up with a sophisticated implementation with it yet, unless this new Cakewalk thing is it. But I mean, generally, it's kind of like WebGL. I mean, you've got all the power of the GPU right in the browser nowadays, so there's no reason technically why you couldn't have a very capable DAW running on the cloud. Not at all. So yeah, I did identify a couple shots here where we need to put back Mel's armbands, right? So there's some stupid stuff, but that's going to be pretty quick. So there's Tia talking to the bird. No, it goes back to Mel. How are we doing here? It's about 8 o'clock EST. I think I fixed up this shot. Today? Was it today or yesterday? I don't know. It's all a blur. It's all a blur, friends. Can't keep track of it anymore. It was today, because I remember I did those shots today. Hey, Ed. I'm just reviewing my webisode 4. I'm actually thinking I'm probably pretty close to being able to get cracking on the soundtrack. Get it out. Were you able to see the last two? Ed, you're very kind. Alright, so that's the shot I just punched up here a little bit ago. Well, it's not, there's nothing, I have to say, there's nothing snapping me out of it. Right? There's nothing making me go, whoa, that needs to be fixed, kind of thing. So, I think we're okay here. Again, there's a lot of cartoony exaggeration in this episode, but it seems to work. Cowboy Bebop. I believe I saw. Didn't you release that like a week or so ago? Seems to me. Pretty sure I saw that. It's been a crazy week. It's a little embarrassing, but and nothing to do with animation. I've had, the last 2 weeks on the commercial side. Has been really busy. Quite a crazy time. Alright, I think we're in good shape, folks. I think it's going to be time tomorrow to start working on soundtrack stuff. That's what I'm thinking. Well, I'll say it again. If anybody has questions for Ed Hooks, we haven't worked out the time to interview him, but I'm pulling up his site here. So, but this guy, Ed Hooks, he wrote this book, Acting for Animators, with a foreword by Brad Bird, and he's and I finished the book yesterday, so this is the book. And I have to say, it is a good resource. I wasn't so sure for the first about 50 pages, but once I got about to page 50, I'm like, okay, this is a good book. This is a book that belongs on your shelf. Just because of the way it really teaches you some things about acting that will inform your animation and really help you find your voice, actually, as an animator. In other words, instead of attacking animation as an animator, just trying to adhere to animation convention that you've seen in shows that you like or movies, This is like, okay, let's approach this from the vantage point of acting, and the more you know about what constitutes good acting may inform your animation work. Again, so you sort of find your unique voice as a storyteller, really. So anyway, as I said, and I'm saying this to sort of wrap up today, I'm looking at the comments here real quick. But anyway, as I said, I've been dialoguing back and forth email with Ed, and we've kind of hit it off and have had a fair amount of back and forth actually over the last few days. And so he agreed to do an interview because I just thought, his voice, and he does these I guess you call them master classes. He does these master classes all over the world. And anyway, so when I interview him, if anybody has specific questions, for that you would want to ask Ed, you might want to chime in, and then depending on what he has to say may cause you to want to buy his book. Okay, so Amar's, are you still talking about the cakewalk thing? You're sharing a screenshot of that? Huh. I would, if I had a bet, especially considering that the code base for Sonar is not, it's not a cloud-based program. They'd have to completely rewrite it to run in the browser, unless they did some really fancy work with oh golly, what's the, darn it, I'm having a brain fart on the underlying technology in the browser, WebAssembly. To convert the C code to WebAssembly and then make it run in a browser. It's possible, but probably it's a locally run program that has an online login or something. But that's neither here nor there. If people want to try it, they can try it. So anyway, I think that Soda Pop, I'll tell you that I read the book. After I made contact with Ed and we kind of were conversing, I'm like, okay, they happen to have it at my local library, so I just ran downtown and got a copy and read it real quick yesterday. So because I wanted to be able to formulate some questions, for an interview. But and it's a solid book. It gives you, I like it because it sort of quantizes. Think of it as quantizing some of the characteristics of animation, some of the acting related aspects of animation, where you're sort of breaking the process down into a discrete set of choices. And I think limitations oftentimes, it's a more simplified view than a wide open approach. But when you do that, it kind of gives you a set of choices, sort of tools in your toolkit that you can pick from, that when you mix and match them, you have an infinite variety of directions you can go. You know what I mean? So oh, he has a free course on ArtStation. Okay, I didn't see that. Like I said, it's been a bit of a crazy week, so I haven't been. I've like glanced at Discord. The past week, I've like glanced at it twice. So anyway, I'm wasting your guys' time. I think I'm pretty much done for tonight. The shot came out nice. It's really just a fix-up kind of thing. Just a little more character in the performance, and I'm satisfied with it. And I think I'm ready to pretty much call it a night. So as you guys know, there will be more later.